Hi my loves, you are welcome to Olives. In this video I will share with you a process of how to cut and sew a mermaid skirt with a front slit. So do keep on watching. Let's get right into this video. Over here I have my pattern paper. The first line serves as the waistline. I marked down waist to the hip 10 inches, waist to knee 22, and the length of the skirt 48 inches with extra allowance of 1 inch. You may as well use half inch. Okay, so I have the front on fold. I'm going to mark quarter of the waist and mark it here like this. I'll add extra 1 inch as that. Moving down to the hip, quarter of the hip. The hip is 40 divided by 4 is 10. So I'll mark 10 inches from the front like this. And I'll connect the waist to the hip with a curve. The actual waist to knee measurement I have here is 22 inches. If we have our mermaid or the flare starting from the 22 inches, it's going to give a little tightening around the knee area. So I'll go up from this initial knee line by 2.5 inches and connect with a straight line. This will give much more ease while walking. Very important to do this. Okay, so on this knee line with the initial hip measurement, which is 10 inches, we want the knee line to tape in. That's the knee area to tape in. Okay, so I'm going to deduct about 1.5 inch from whatever result I have as quarter of my hip, and I'm going to deduct 1.5 because there will be a slit. If there will be no slit, then I'll deduct just 1 inch from quarter of my hip. So deducting 1.5, I have 8.5. I'll connect this with a curve and with a straight line down to the knee. Alright, so moving on to the lower part, we are still going to be needing the 10 inches as the hip. Okay, so I'm going to mark 10 inches from the center front like this, and this is where you determine the amount of fullness you want. So I will advise that the fullness should start from 5 inches. Okay, so 5 inches upwards. So I'm going to use about 7 inches after marking the 10 inches. That's a total of 17 inches at the lower part. I'll connect them together like this. After connecting, I'm going to measure from the knee to the hem from the center front, and I had 29.5 inches. I made sure the same 29.5 inches is there. I'll connect with a curve. I'll blend the knee area nicely like this. Now we have our front. We'll work with allowance of 1.25 or 1/4. You might as well work with a little allowance, okay? But at the lower part, I made sure I had about 1 inch. Half inch will also make sense. We do not want much allowance at the hem of the mermaid. Okay, so this is the front. Now we will work on the dart, marking half of our bust band or nipple to nipple measurement 7. Dividing by 2 is 3.5. I'll mark half inch on both sides of the center line. I'll come down by about 5 inches. You may as well work with 5.5. Make sure the same 3.5 is from the center front. Connect the darts together. Now with the dart, you can decide to close it. Okay, for me, I do not want to sew the dart on the skirt. Okay, so you can either close or take that 1 inch dart away from the side. That means you are not working with that, or you sew it. Okay, in my case, I intend to just close it this way. If you also want to do away with your dart this way by closing, then do not bother about the puff part. It will be okay. Okay, I just blended the waistline together. To prevent gaping around the center front or smile lines, I'll mark down 3/4 inch from the starting line, which is the waistline, like this, and blend it together to the side of the skirt. Yeah, so this will be taken off. We will have to add half inch above the line we have, but to just prevent confusion, I'll do that on the fabric so you can see. Okay, so I'll cut. our front is ready. We'll work on the back same way, shoulder to hip 10, shoulder to knee 22, and the full length plus the 1 inch. Okay, I added extra zip extension which is necessary for the back, 1 inch zip extension. Okay, so on the waistline I'm going to tighten the center back by going in from the center back by 3/4 inch. I'll connect this to the hip. At this point we just got light out, so I use this opportunity to just cut out the front piece while we wait for the light to return, then we continue with the back. So I just went ahead to pin added allowance, that's the 1/2 inch allowance, to the top part and then cut out the shape. Now we are on the back, thankfully, so I'm just going to connect like this, and on the knee I'm also going to take out 3/4 inch and also blend it to the hip. This is a way of contouring the hip, just as our hip is, we just want the shape to follow our hip. All right, so I'm going to connect this down to the hem of the skirt, or the hem of the length for now. Now I'm just going to remark the 1 inch zip extension following the new line I have marked. Okay, so here is our new zip extension. Okay, so moving on the waist, that's from the new center back, I'll mark 1/4 of the waist measurement. The waist I'm working with is 28 inches. Okay, on the back I'm not going to bother adding that. On the hip I'll mark 1/4 of the hip as well and connect it together. Following the shape we have on the hip, same way we have 10 inches, right? I'm going to deduct 1.5 inch from this 10 inches, which is 8 inches, and mark this on the knee line. I'm going to just connect them together. Right, moving down to the hem, same way, 10 inches, I'll add extra 7 inches to the hem, that's a total of 17 inches. Mark it and connect to the knee. I'm not sure you realized this, but comment down below. It is at this point I realized I didn't go up from the knee line by 2.5 inches, so I had to erase everything and do the right thing. I marked 2.5 inches above the knee line to create a new knee line. Then I reblend everything together, remark the 8.5 inches, connected again to the hip, and I connected this to the hem. Mark the same 29.5 I had on the center back and the center front, just like that. And for the back, I wanted a little extension. I wanted the back to be a bit longer than the front, so I marked 5 inches down. I had it this way, and I'm just going to connect from that extra extension to meet the side. This is when you want it to be long. So if you want it longer, like let's say 20 inches longer than the front, this is what you do. Okay, and you just connect it this way. In case you want to add extra tail to the center back, then that means you need more extension from the center back, that's from the zip extension. Okay, so for me, I have this extension about 6 inches, so I'm just going to connect from the end of the extension to the knee straight up. Okay, so let's do this. The first or the initial curve we made is when you want the back length to be longer than the front length. Okay, so that's me trying to show you there is a difference. Okay, so now that we've added a tail, we now need to reconnect from the end to meet the side. Okay, from the extreme end to meet the side, so there might be a little difference while curving, right? So I'll move on to add my 1/4 inch allowance. I later trimmed that allowance to be 1 inch. Okay, so I'll add 1/2 inch to the waist of the skirt like this. I'll move on to cut the back piece out. Now I'm going to be attaching this skirt to a top to make a dress, okay? So in case this is just going to be a skirt for you, then you will have to bind the skirt or add facing, okay? I make sure I add the necessary notches, place them on the fabric, actually on green, move on to cut out. So this is the back. We've already cut the front and back together. Moving on to the front, which has a slit. I've pinned the pattern to one side of the skirt, which will have the slit, so I could demonstrate for you to see clearly, okay? So we are going to still be working with our nipple to nipple or bust band measurement, which is 7. Then I'll divide it by 2, 3.5. I'll mark this 3.5 on the knee line. I'll mark the same thing at the end of the hem. What I have here is my pattern on the fabric, but normally you just do the slit on the skirt, right, on the fabric. So you determine the center front of your skirt with notch and with crease, then you mark your 3.5 inches from the center front, okay? So I'm going to mark this up. This is where I want the slit to start from, which means you might want to move upwards as much as you want, but make sure you connect those lines together, okay? I went on to mark 3/4 inch on both sides of the gray line I have and mark the same thing here. I'm going to put it into a straight line, and I'm just going to use a curve with my free hand as well to just mark the curve. And then connect with a straight line to meet the other lines. So this is our slit. Now in case you want the slit to be opened more, then you have to maintain the line by cutting on the green line, then you sew away from it to open it more, right? But if you want to maintain this exact measurement, then you have to mark about 1/4 inch inward from the green line, so it will serve as allowance, okay? So let me do what I just explained for you to see, okay? So this is it. I'll move on to cut the paper first, then cut out the fabric. Yeah, so this is what we have. You can either cut the same thing as lining and just knitting the edge, or you also stitch after knitting. However, I will be using bias to finish the edge of the slit. Now for you and I, that if you'll be using bias to sew around the curved part easily, we will notch around this way, then it will just be easier for us to work. So let's move to the machine. I went ahead to first fix the zip to the center back. That's an invisible zip. Then I also went on to work with the bias by attaching the bias from the right side first. As I got to the curved part, I just straightened it this way, placed the bias over, then I went on to stitch to the other end of the slit. So after doing this, I also understitched. Then I finally turned the bias to the wrong side and stitched on the right side of the skirt. So this is how it looked like, and this is also the back piece after working with the zip. This is the front with the slit. I went on to press. Now I'm going to place them right sides facing and pin the notches together. That's by locating the knee notches and pin them together, as well as the hip line notch. So I'm just going to pin the rest of the sides, and this is how it looks like. I'm also going to work on the other side, I'll finally move on to join them together. So after joining them together, I'll knitting round and just turn a lee. You might as well hem twice or overlock it. We've come to the end of this video. I enjoyed it myself. I hope you enjoyed watching and learning with me. If yes, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, turn on your notification bell to be notified. Thank you for watching. I hope to see your comments down below. Related tutorials will be linked in the description box. See you.